You've all heard the news already at this time that we're really here to celebrate the unveiling of the Wintrust Building's mural celebrating Care for Friends. If you don't know about Care for Friends, it's a homeless services organization in Lincoln Park. It started its work in 1968 during the Democratic National Convention. A church opens its doors to let all the protesters, sleep and get food and all of that. And they never shut their doors after that. And so about 15 years ago, Care for Friends spun off from that church, became a nonprofit organization, and they built a $10 million community center that opened 6 weeks ago. That's going to serve 12,000 homeless guests a year. And next week, all three sides of the Wintrust Mural Building are going to be celebrating Care for Friends with artwork by the Chicago and world-renowned artist, David Lee Csicsko. You recognize him from the stunning mosaics at the Belmont L station. You see him on your grocery bags if you shop at Mariano's. If you have seen any pictures of the Obama White House Christmas parties, we see a lot of that on CNN right now as they talk about the changes to the East Wing. They're constantly showing stained glass windows by David. So you're really familiar with all of that stuff. He also partnered with the Lurie Children's Museum on a really cool children's book called The Skin That You Live In, written by Michael Tyler. And it's become a cornerstone of really the world's conversations about diversity. I was really thinking your work is so woven into the city of Chicago. We talked about Belmont L, we talked about the Lurie Children's Hospital, and it's known for its spirit. What drove you specifically to this project and the mission of Care for Friends that made you excited about working with Hope and this team?
You guys found me and approached me about the project. You invited me to come on a Thursday to observe the free meal programs out on the north side, and I was so touched by the incredible sense of dignity that I was seeing happening for those who are in need. That they sat down to a beautifully home-cooked meal made by volunteers, and then brought by the most attractive young people you've ever seen, delivering these plates. But every time I go, I was like, where do they get these people? But it was also, I was aware that sometimes it would be an organization that they were encouraged to volunteer that day or whatever. They got a variety of people coming in to help out, but also just how the guests were enjoying themselves, that it was this wonderful community where you sat down, there was a tablecloth, you ate on a real plate with a real piece of flatware. You weren't eating on paper plates, and you were eating with plastic. But I just found that incredibly touching and incredibly humble. And so one of the main things I thought with this mural was to showcase the humbleness of the organization and the directness of it. So I went many times to draw and take photographs, and in a very casual way, got to know several of the people who were recipients of their kindness and their hospitality. And people were like Hope said, "Is it okay if David takes your picture?" I want to take your picture, but then suddenly people were like, "Take my picture. I want to be in this. You got to take my picture." And so several people are in the mural who asked me to draw them or take a picture. And it was a really lovely experience of observing this great organization that I think is so needed and is so comforting, especially we are at Thanksgiving. It's a time to give thanks, but also we're living in these hard times of a difficult administration who doesn't care about those in need and only are selfishly thinking about themselves. So seeing all this good work kind of brings out the Franciscan in me, but also makes me think of when I was 10. I lived in a brand new neighborhood. There was a Catholic church. That's why we moved to this neighborhood. And my mother goes, "We're showing a holiday feature. You should go to see this movie." So I went on a Sunday to a documentary about the hardships of Appalachia at Christmas time. And I thought I was going to see Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, but I was seeing this gritty black and white documentary. And my mother goes, what did you think of the movie? I said, did you know what this movie is about? She goes, no, I'm sure it was something wonderful. I said, well, I learned all about how hard things are in Appalachia. She goes, well, that's a very important lesson because not everyone is as fortunate as you are, and you need to keep your eyes open. So, in the tradition of something I learned when I was 10, it's very gratifying to participate, create something that hopefully is uplifting, and do this project. And I really think your organization is exquisite. It's wonderful. It's so needed. And hopefully I've captured it in the right way.
There are 300,000 cars pass that every day, and sometimes very slowly. So some of them are stuck in traffic. But at other times of the day, they're whizzing by at like 50 miles an hour. So how did you think about, and as we printed these out here, they're 6 feet long, which feel big in this room, but even bigger. How do you think about how do you create an image that someone's going to be able to capture in that, quick moment? And how do you just think about that as a canvas for your artistic expression?
Well, again, trying to celebrate the humbleness of the organization. I'm very fortunate that I've got to do a lot of terrific projects over the year, and sometimes done some really large murals that were temporary, like this one is, but they had all the bells and whistles. And for this organization, I wanted to pare it down and sort of honor the simplicity, but also the city is very difficult to work with, because originally I was hoping to write these nice hand-lettered sentences explaining which each of the three murals, and I kept being told by the liaison between the city and Wintrust, nope, you can't do that. You can't do that. You can't do that. And maybe they'll let you get away with one word. And then I found out that I couldn't even put my name on it. But that's okay. Anyway, so we pared it down. This was a fantastic team. They were so kind. The first mural that I did was this mural, which was the meal service program. And I said, it's so big that if I send it to you, you won't get it. If you don't mind coming to my house and looking at the computer, and also the budget was really tight that to make these prints eats up money. So they kindly came over to my barking dog that wanted so much attention, and they were very patient with it. And they looked at it, and they were wonderful. And so the next other two projects, they didn't have to make a house visit, but it was really about trying to tell the story of the organization in a way that feels direct, that since we don't have the luxury of a sentence, that a word like meals and groceries and healthcare, hopefully that tells the story, because they were very clear in what they wanted each of the three murals to do. They had to tell the story of the three components of their extraordinary organization.
When we look at that building, we see the water tower with the Chicago flag on it, and then there's a little tiny square chimney, and then there are three sides of murals. And we see the three murals here. And the city was very explicit with you that the murals are artwork. The chimney can be advertising.
Yes.
And there were lots of requirements there. Can you tell us a little bit about, what were the unique nuances of just this space and how you navigate each of those different requirements and different needs?
It's really about telling the story. So trying to tell the story in an easy way, but finding out what the sizes are, and luckily I have a lot of experience from the work that I do, that I have to deal with a lot of red tape with the city. And to quote a line from Linda Berry's "The Good Times Are Killing Me," we are used to that by now. So it's just sort of part of the job. But again, you guys both made it so easy, and it was really a pleasure to sort of figure out what to do. A personal story about working on the project was that when I did the last component, which is the healthcare point, my father just passed away, who was 93. But in May, he had a fall and no one knew. And he laid on the ground for many days until he was discovered. And he lived. But I was constantly going back and forth to Indiana to go to the hospital, meet with people. And I was doing this last component, and I was feeling a bit depressed about everything. And so I thought, you need to make this uplifting. This is the last section. It was the last part that was done. And the other two panels had already been approved. And I was really stumbling, so I turned off what I was doing, and I went to my computer and I typed in Pinterest 1960s French advertising posters, and suddenly I saw all these happy images, and I thought I need to bring this kind of happiness, and I started thinking about the Madeline books written and illustrated by Ludwig Bemelman, and I thought, what if Madeline in the story grew up to become a social worker or a doctor that was her healthcare practice was serving those in need. And suddenly I came up with this very sweet, in the right-hand corner, young lady taking someone's blood pressure. And I had this incredible encounter twice when I came during the healthcare Saturdays, talking to a wonderful volunteer, Carol. And we had a lovely conversation about how much she likes this organization, and she is a retired nurse and where she went to school. And I got to know her, and suddenly I thought Carol is going to be featured prominently in here. So I kind of composed the parts around it. And also I was just so touched by all the volunteers. So I was trying to include them. Sometimes it's inaccurate. Sometimes it's a composite of a guy with a beard and another guy who had broad shoulders and a small waist. Maybe it's not the same guy. I don't know. But anyway, I was drawing all kinds of people, and sometimes I would mix it up a little bit.
Thanks for that. And it's serendipitous. We're hearing so much about SNAP benefits and grocery delivery and all of that. Can you tell us a little bit more about what Care for Friends is doing with that program and why that's particularly important for us to be thinking about and celebrating this particular holiday season?
The grocery delivery program started right after COVID, or really in a response to COVID, because we had started an after-school program for youth experiencing homelessness. And when COVID hit, we didn't want to be redundant, right, in what we were offering. And so we spoke with the CPS teachers, counselors, and said, hey, we want to support the students that we had been coming to the program. How can we do that in a way that will actually support them? And so after kind of conferring, we landed on groceries. But because we had to pause our volunteer program, we really had limited staff. So we decided to pivot, use a micro grant that we had received during that time to get groceries to the youth that we had supported through Instacart. And then in December of 2020, the grant funding ran out, but we realized, oh my goodness, this is a huge need in the city. And so we did our research and realized that there's a phenomenal support for grocery delivery here. And it always supports folks who are homebound within a close proximity of that food pantry. So very, very needed. We noticed that there was a gap in terms of delivering groceries to youth specifically, without really geographic restriction. And so we decided to carve out this program that did just that.